Hello everybody, welcome back. This is EonShiKeno back with another strategy video tutorial. Today we're going to cover some Terran strategy. We're going to look at a T versus almost any other race strategy that involves getting 16 Marines out with Stim plus 2 Medivacs to do some drop harass. Let's take a look at the build order. Okay, let's have a look at this build order here. I did a little mock-up for you to show you the build order. Not the typical build order. You're going to open up with 2 barracks before you eventually get to your factory. Now, I worked out these timings pretty well, so you should get Stim, your 16 Marines, and your 2 Medivacs almost at about the exact same time. That way, it sets you up for a really nice timing attack. Okay, so like I said, we're going to go 2 barracks opening. The second barracks is going to be delayed until after our gas is up. We're going to need to get gas up at the normal time, the 13 supply. That way we can research Stim, spend our gas on Stim, spend our gas on our factory, stuff like that. So I like to get 2 Marines out before I start my tech lab, just so you've got a couple Marines to deny any scouting, stuff like that. And throw down your second factory after you get that. And then after you start your factory, I like to get my gas up. That way you'll have enough gas for the Medivacs and the Reactor you're going to need later. And I like to start my Stim right after I start my factory, so all that happens about the same time period. And I like to constantly produce Marines. Now, there's some different ways you can go with this. I like kind of just like the solid, pure Marine composition with this drop, as opposed to Marine plus Marauder. Marine just have a higher DPS per food value. So if you take 2 Marines, which is 2 supply, versus 1 Marauder, the 2 Marines have a higher DPS. So I prefer that. It just allows for a really high amount of DPS. Marauders are nice in certain situations, but for the type of play we're going to go with here, I think Marines are better. So we're just going to have constant Marine production, or almost constant Marine production. Sometimes you have to save a little bit of money to get your buildings out as soon as possible. So we're going to start our Starport up. We're going to start a reactor on our factory as soon as our Starport gets going. That way we can do a little swap here, make 2 Medivacs at once. Then you'll see here we're going to have our Stim just about ready to be finished, our Medivacs coming out. And I also like to start a command center just as a follow-up. This is not an all-in, this is not, one and gun, you're over. This just sets you up for a position so you can kind of get ahead in the game, set up an expansion, fall back, and from there you can go any direction you want. You can, start getting more Medivacs, you could get Vikings, you could just get really heavy bio, you could go Marine tank and go for a second timing push after you get your expansion up. You've got a lot of options here. So we're going to see the Stim finishes at, look at that, about the exact same second those Medivacs get out, and then you wait for your last 2 Marines to come out, and you go out and go for a drop. And from here, you can do a lot of things with these 2 Medivacs. You can do a double drop, a double 16 Marine Medivac drop right in their main, and just do a ton of damage, just like go all for it. You have 2 Medivacs healing up Marines with Stim, that can deal a lot of damage. Or if your opponent has went for a fast expansion, you may want to, drop one on one, one on the other. I don't know, from this point on, it really just depends on what you see. Now, let me talk about what you're going to see, what your scouting is in this game. So at about the 6-minute and 20-second mark, you should have enough for a scan, and this is when I like to scan my opponent's base. It's a really good timing to go for a scan. It's right before your Stim's going to be finished, right before your Medivacs come out, so it's going to give you a good idea of what your opponent's up against. Now here I'm just demoing this versus the easy computer, but I like to scan right on top of the center of their base, see how many gas they have. That's usually a good indicator of what they're going to go for, how many gas they have. Or you could do something along the lines of scanning in between the bases to see if they have an expansion, stuff like that. Or if they're Protoss, maybe scanning where you see the pylons from your initial scout. One thing I didn't mention earlier on the build order is I like to send my scout out after my barracks finishes. I like to send that scout out just to make sure, to see if they're going for maybe a hatch first, nexus first, command center first, just really risky play like that. And if that's the situation, you don't even really need to wait around for your Medivacs because you're going 2 barracks opening anyway. You can just straight up start the pressure from there. So that's kind of how I like to doing the scouting. I just like to save that one scan. I like to save the one scan just so I have a good idea of what I'm getting myself into. What type of production does he have, or what type of units can I expect to see. I really like this opening as Terran. It's pretty versatile. You can use it in a lot of different matchups. Whenever like Protoss decide to go, like 1 gate expand, it seems to work really well. Marines just tear through Zealots and Stalkers with Stim and Medivacs. Versus Zerg, it's not as effective as it is versus Terran and Protoss, but if you can maybe scan their base and you see a crevasse where you can, drop your Marines behind their spawning pool, or just get in a really nice position that's kind of really cut off, you can just do an insane amount of damage. And they're just games I win straight up on the ladder just because my opponent, isn't ready for it, because this is a very uncommon build. I think it was first used, way back in the beta, just doing straight up Marine Medivac Stim drop. I mean, it's almost never used anymore, but I think it's still a really strong build. And if you do it, enough, you'll start to see areas where you can, diverge based on what you see with your initial attack. But I think if you practice this a lot, and you practice your drops and just your micro, you can just go in there, take your opponent by surprise, and just wipe the floor with them. Now, one thing, of course, whenever you do go out in an attack, you're taking your entire army with you. So if they decide to counterattack you at the same time you're attacking them, it's going to go in a base race scenario. Those are always tricky, but that's kind of just one of the drawbacks of this build, is that, if they do go for a base race, you'll have Marines with Stim, and they'll probably won't have anything as strong, because Marines with Stim with Medivacs this early on in the game is such a really strong composition. Another thing you might want to watch out for is whenever you scan your opponent, let's say you're playing a Terran, you scan your opponent, you see, okay, he's got a Starport with a Reactor on there, and he's researching Cloak. You should probably start saving your scans up until that point, just to make sure that if he does send a Banshee to your base, you will have enough Marines there, and you'll have a scan to detect it. And if you want to, you can delay the command center and throw up an engineering bay and then a missile turret to deal with that Banshee. But that's really the only things that could, straight up kill you. DTs aren't really that big of a deal. Marines, almost insta-kill DTs if you've got scans. It's not really that big of a deal, and you'll have a wall off. So I hope you guys have good luck with this build in the future. That's it for me. Make sure to subscribe to catch some more strategy tutorials as they come out. I'm going to try and do more of these more frequently. I know everybody's been enjoying this far. I'm just going to try and produce a couple more. And also, I do a bunch of casting, so tune in for that too. See everybody later.